Moshiach Matters class. We are holding over here, Parshas told us, we're holding over here about when Yitzchak goes to live in the land of the Philistines. And last week we learned very interesting Chasam Sofer dealing with the pasuk that Yitzchak planted in that land. Maayon was very, very successful. And he drew forth Bashanahi in the year, even though it was a bad year, 100 times as much that was evaluated by Yervachehu Hashem, and Hashem blessed him. Last week we learned by Yervachehu was by Yavarech Hey Vav. He brought down the full completion, so it should be Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yitzchak completed the tikkun that needed to be the manifestation of godliness in this world. So we learned last week. You can listen to the class. I don't think it was posted yet, so we have to post it. In any case, so today we have an exciting class. We are going to discuss this whole mice over here, the whole story over here. A little bit of a general synopsis. Earlier we learned that Yitzchak, there was a famine in the land. If you go back to the beginning of the Perek Chavav, it says there was a famine in the land, and Yitzchak came down to Gror. Hashem appeared to him, and Hashem said to him, don't go down to Egypt, dwell in this land that I am telling you, Gur. And then first he tells him dwell in the land, then he tells him live in the land, and I will be with you, because to you and your children I will give these lands, and I will keep my promise to Avram Avinu. Okay, fine. We discussed quite a lot about that, but today there's a big chiddush. Then it says they started up with Rivka, or they didn't, but then Avimelech had complaints on Yitzchak, why he didn't tell him it's his wife, all that story. Then it says how Yitzchak sowed the land, and he was very, very successful, and the crop was a magnificent crop. Then it continues, the pasuk says, I'm going to read the next few psukim. And of course, we're going to spend over the next couple of classes, probably the next, I would say 5-6 classes, we're still going to learn the subject over here about the digging of Yitzchak, digging the be'eros, Yitzchak digging the wells. But we're just going to be a short idea, and that is Vayigdal ish vayelech hadol v'gadol atki gadol ma'od. It says Yitzchak became very, very great. Yitzchak's growth was incredible. Vayiloi miknet soyin, he had a lots of cattle, of sheep, or miknei bakar, and cattle of larger animals. Vavuda rabba, flocks of larger animals. Vavuda rabba, and he had a lot of work. Vayikana isa plishtim, and the plishtim were envious of him. The Philistines were envious of Yitzchak. Okay, which is a story that continues till to the very day today. Actually, today's class is going to be all about how you see the Torah is forecasting the entire Palestinian conflict and the difficulty with Gaza. It's amazing. We're going to get to that in a moment. Then it says, V'chol ha'beiros ha'shachavru avdei aviv. Now, Avram Avinu was already once came down to live in that place. Okay, remember, Avram also came down to the Philistines. That's when Avimelech grabbed Sarah, right? And then Hashem brought plagues in Avimelech's home. So it says over here that all of the be'eros, all of the wells that his father's servants had dug, Avram Avinu's servants had dug wells in the Philistine land over there, b'mei Avram Aviv, in the days of Avram his father, Sitman Pelishtim, the Pelishtim clogged those wells. Vayamal Amafar, and they filled them up with dirt. So that's what happened. Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, gets upset with Yitzchak because of his enormous success. As we said earlier, that they were very envious. And he says to him, get out of here. Leave us. Because you became too powerful. You're too great. So Yitzchak leaves, and he camped in the valley of Gerar. Instead of being in the city of Gerar, he moved to the valley. And he settled over there. He didn't settle, he lived over there. Vayashav Yitzchak. So now what does Yitzchak do? He goes back. He redigs all the be'eros, all the wells that they dug in the days of Avram his father. And the Pelishtim, the Philistines, had clogged those wells. After the death of Avram Avinu, As long as Avram was alive, the Pelishtim were afraid. They didn't touch his wells. But after Avram Avinu passed away, the Pelishtim got their chutzpah, and they went and they clogged those wells that Avram Avinu had dug, that Avram's servants dug. So now what does Yitzchak do? Before he begins digging his own wells, he redigs his father's wells. And he calls them with names, and he renames them with the same names that his father named them. As we're going to see that Yitzchak's, however, names lasted and Avram's names didn't last. That's why Avram's names, meaning now, when Yitzchak called him that way, it lasted. The wells were permanent. That's why over here it says Shemois with a Vav, and by Avram Avinu it says Kashemois, like the names that are mentioned by Avram are mentioned without a Vav. But Be'ez Hashem, we're going to leave that for next week's class. But now let's continue. Because what we're going to do today is I want to give you a bird's eye view of this whole story. So after they finished redigging his father's wells and renaming them with the old names that they were named already by the names of Avram, then what does it say? That the servants of Yitzchak dug again started digging in the valley. They found a spring of living water, a well of living water. So now the shepherds of Gerar with the shepherds of Yitzchak got into a quarrel, into an argument. Lamar saying, Lanu Amoyim. They claimed that the water belongs to them. Even though Yitzchak's servants were the ones who dug it, they said it's ours. So they called it quarrel because they quarreled with him. They named that well a quarrel because it was a quarrel. So Yitzchak's servants went and they dug another well. Immediately they contested that well as well. So they called that name of that place hatred. Because they saw that it wasn't that they really believe it's theirs. You see that they just have, simply it's anti-Semitism. They hate him, and therefore, now we dug a second well, and they claimed this well as well. So they moved away from there. They dug a third well. Finally, now they didn't argue on it. They didn't fight on pond. They didn't contest this well. So now finally he names this well Rechayvos. He called it Rechayvos, which by the way is a town in Israel called Rechavot, right? Named after this story. And he said, now it's broad, because now Hashem broadened for us, and we're able to be fruitful in the land. This is the story. 3 wells. The third well lasted. So if you go through the whole story, it begins with Yitzchak not wanting to. Let's go back to the very beginning. Yitzchak was planning to go down to Egypt. Hashem said to Yitzchak, don't go down to Egypt because you're a holy. You can't go down to Egypt. Instead, stay in the land, this land. And he tells him to stay in the Philistinian land, which is really strange because the Philistinian land is not holy. It's not Kaddish B'Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. You see, in the halachic things, this land is not a holy land. So how come Yitzchak was permitted to live in that land? We'll see in a moment. Then what happens? Hashem promises him, but Hashem promises the land I will give you. I've given it to you, and I'm keeping the promise I made to Avram. Then there's a story how Yitzchak. What's the next story? Yitzchak plants the land, and he has an unbelievable successful crop. And then what's it called again? Avimelech gets envious of him and tells him to leave. Yitzchak has to leave. He moves away, but he moves into the suburbs. Over there he digs 3. First he redigs his father's wells. Then he digs 3 wells. The first 2 are unsuccessful. The third one is successful. And Yitzchak says, now we came to the Chayvos. Question over here is just on this last thing. We came to the Chayvos. Yitzchak wasn't going to stay over here. Chayvos as if like, now I'm okay. My rest of my life, I'm fine. No one's going to bother me. Yitzchak goes back to live in Be'er Sheva. This is not by Be'er Sheva. This is in the land of the Philistines. So what's the excitement over here that he calls it Rechayvos and Frina, as if he finally found a place where we can live out the rest of his life in peace and in harmony when he doesn't even stay here. So you have to say when he calls this place Rechayvos, this is some kind of an indication of something else, or he's referring to a much greater event that's going to happen, not now, but maybe in the future, as we're going to see so. Then, by the way, in the end it says how Avimelech comes to ask forgiveness. Yitzchak says to him, why'd you come to me? And he says, you hate me, you sent me away. And Avimelech says, now we see that Hashem was with you and there should be a covenant. Let's make a covenant. Okay, that's the story. So number one question I asked of you is, I asked already two questions. Question number one we asked was, when Hashem tells Yitzchak, stay in this land, because you can't go out to Chutz Li'aretz. You can't go out of Eretz Yisrael. You're too holy. You're a korban. And therefore, Gur Ba'aretz Hazois, live in this land. But hold it, this land is also not holy. So what is he telling Yitzchak to live in that land? It's the Philistine land. Secondly, the second question is related to that as well. In the end, when he finally digs a well and it lasts, and he's so happy as if this is going to be his home. When Yitzchak doesn't even stay there. In the end, he goes away to Beersheba, and that's where he is. So what's this great simcha that's happening over here? So the Marit is one of the great scholars. He has a sefer called Tzafas Paneach. I wanted to get a chance. I'm always rushing, and I didn't get a chance to really. Wanted to do some investigation of exactly when the Marit lived. Which I am. Oh, hold it. Let me get to the place here. I think it's Sefer Tzafnas Paneach. Let's make sure. Yeah, it's a Sefer Tzafnas Paneach to the Marit. Who the Marit is and when did he live, I am not exactly sure. It's always good, especially when you get one of these. I don't think he's from the Rishonim. I don't think he goes back, but I think he's from the early Acharonim. That's what I think. Lamarit. His name was Rabbi Yosef of Trani. Okay, I'm going to do some research on him soon, but now I didn't get a chance to do so. In any case, so he really, in his discussion of this story, mamish, it's not prophecy because it's like he relates the story of the most contestant. I would say the most contestant, but the most problematic piece of land that the Jewish people have to deal with, and that is Gaza. This whole Gaza Strip, by the way, has always been a troublesome situation and problematic for the Jewish people. You see, when the Jewish people initially came up with Yeshua during the first conquest, when we conquered Eretz Yisrael, it says that the tribe of Yehuda went into Gaza and actually and conquered certain lands. A place called Bet Shan. Let me see, where did they go up? They came in and, hold on. Oh, it's a Jerusalem Talmud, Masechta Shvius. The Yerushalmi says, "Vayilkoit Yehuda liyahar Aza," that Yehuda conquered Yahar Aza, and that means when Yehuda conquered it, became sanctified in the holiness of Eretz Yisrael. And he conquered also Ashkelon. Now, anybody knows Ashkelon? I was just there for a Shabbos a couple of months ago. Ashkelon is far, far south. It's right next to Gaza. When they shot the missiles just recently, the missiles were landing in Ashkelon, from Gaza into Ashkelon. So Ashkelon and Gaza, this whole area was conquered in the time of when they came the first time. But afterwards, we know that there was always problems with the Philistines. The Philistines fought back, and there was a back and forth, and we lost it. We didn't really hold on to it. And that's why the second conquest, when the Jewish people came back in the days of Ezra, and we took a hold of the land, possession of the land, this whole piece of land never became part of Eretz Yisrael. So even though it had holiness during the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, in the first time we were in Eretz Yisrael, we know that Kedusha of the first conquest in Eretz Yisrael did not last. When the Jewish people left Eretz Yisrael, we lost Yerushalayim. Yeah, the Beis HaMikdash was still holy, the Makam HaMikdash, but not Eretz Yisrael. Its holiness was, and Ezra had to be re-Mekadesh, had to be re-sanctified the land of Israel. And when he re-sanctified, this strip of land of or Gaza was not re-sanctified. And it had no holiness. But here's the idea: is that in the end of days, this piece of land is going to become part of Eretz Yisrael. And that's why you see that there's an intense struggle for it right now. And what does it have to do? Let me read to you. He brings a medrash. Again, as I mentioned to you earlier, when Yitzchak wanted to go out of the land of Israel because there was a famine in the land and he was planning to go to Mitzrayim, Hashem stopped him. And Hashem said to him, the Medrash says, you are a korban oila, you are a sacrifice, you have holiness of a korban, and therefore you're not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael, just like a korban, a sacrifice, an animal that was that is designated to be a sacrifice. If once it was inside the Azara, if it leaves the Azara, it becomes pasul. It goes outside of out of the boundaries of the courtyard, of the temple courtyard. So too, if you go out of the borders of the land of Israel, you will become, God forbid, pasul. You will become not defiled, but whatever. You will not be. You will be non-kosher for a sacrifice. So that's why Hashem said to him, "Stay in this land, because to this land I will give as kol ha'iratzos ha'el." And the Medrash is perturbed. How come it says ha'iratzos ha'el? Why doesn't it say ha'iratzos ha'eleh? These lands. Usually when we say these, you say eleh. What does it say ha'el? These. So the Medrash says an interesting thing, kashais. This particular land is very hard, difficult land. It's kasha, it's difficult land. It's problematic land, it's problematic territory. And that's why it says el. El means strong. As it says in the pasuk, this ele haaretz lakach, and that he took the strong men of the land. So el means strong. So ratzos el means these fierce land that's very fierce to conquer. It's very difficult. And the Eibishter says, I'm going to give it to you. Davarach, or another pshat, the Medrash says. The reason why it doesn't say ha'eleh, it says el, because el is part of eleh. Eleh is the whole word. El is part of it. So the Medrash says, this comes to teach you, miktsasan ani noisan lach, part of it I give you, and the other, the aim asai ani noisan es ashar, and when will I give you the rest? La'asid lavai, to the future. So it comes out in this, when the Eibishter is telling, when Hashem is telling Yitzchak, I'm giving you these lands, there's two indications in the word these. Number one is that it's a very difficult land. It's resistant. Number two is even when you'll get it, you'll only get a piece of it. And eventually you'll get the whole. Okay. So once we get this, so we realize that in this story right over here, you have the entire Palestinian conflict, at least regarding Gaza. And we'll see something else amazing. The Jewish people were living, when they went out of Gaza, and you had the settlements that were in Gaza, or in Gush Katif, if you remember, they had an incredible bracha. The people in Gush Katif, what they were managed to do over there in terms of desert land, and they were able to turn it into a fertile land in an incredible way. They had such bracha in their land. Then they went and they gave it up. Well, biggest mistake we've ever done. We gave up that land, and when we gave up that land, so now the Palestinians have it. So simply and there's no bracha there. It's all that goes on in that land is that they build tunnels, or who knows what. They have no farming. They have it's dead. So all of this whole idea is discussed over here by the Marit, and he says it's all in these psukim. I mean, obviously he's talking a few hundred years ago, but from what he's saying, you can see that this is what's going on over here. So let's really understand how this how we work this all out. What's the sequence of what happened over here? So the way he sees it is as follows. Let me read for you first a passage of the Gemara in Masechtas Ksubas. So all the way in the end of Masechtas Ksubas, the very end, because the Marit asks a question. The pasuk says that Yitzchak Avinu planted these lands, and Vayimtza Meir Sha'arim, he found tremendous blessing. Rashi says that why does the pasuk emphasize Bashana Ahi and Ahu in that year? Rashi's saying because the year was not a good year. It was a season. It was a kind of drought. There was a drought in Eretz Yisrael, so it was a bad year. And the chiddush is, the novelty is that even though it was such a bad year, there was such an unbelievable crop. Oh, incredible blessing. So the Marit says, I have a question on this. From something it says in the Gemara. The Gemara says in Masechtas Ksubis, Daf Kuf Yud Beis. It's a beautiful Gemara to learn. Tanan Rabbanan, Beberchaisel Shal Eretz Yisrael. In the blessings of Eretz Yisrael, when Eretz Yisrael is blessed, it is not always in Eretz Yisrael, but when Eretz Yisrael is blessed, when the land of Israel is blessed, Beisa Oise Chameshas Riboy Kurin. A small area of a base sa, a place where you plant a sa'ah, gives you in return 50,000 kur of grain. Okay? Now to appreciate how enormous of a blessing that is, that you can pull out 50,000 kur of grain in a small patch of land where you can only plant a sa'ah. So the Gemara does a comparison analysis between Eretz Yisrael and this is a blessed year in Eretz Yisrael. So what the Gemara is now going to do is going to do an analysis as follows. Eretz Yisrael, when it's not blessed, is the next level. There's Eretz Yisrael when it's blessed. Then there's Eretz Yisrael in an ordinary time when it's not blessed. And then there is the best, most fertile land outside of the land of Israel. And that's already third level. So the Gemara says like this. B'yeshivasa shel Tzayan. Tzayan is the area in Goshen where the Jews lived in Egypt, which is considered the most fertile land of Egypt. Now Egypt is a very fertile country because they have the Nile River. And the Nile River brings a lot of, irrigates the fields really well. So Egypt was always known to be a very fertile. You can find the whole story of Yosef, that when there wasn't food anywhere, there was food in Egypt. Okay, so in the land of Tzoan, which Tzoan is like the best, Beisa oisa shivim kurim. In a Beisa, you can produce 70 kur. Now, hear the difference. In Tzoan, which is the most fertile land in Egypt, a Beisa gives you 70 kur. In Eretz Yisrael, in a blessed year, 50,000 kur. Well, let's see how we get to that. The Tanya, Omer Meir. Meir says, Ani re'isi bebikas Beis Shan. I saw in the valley of Bet Shan. Now, Bet Shan is in this Philistine area. Beisa oisa shivim kurim. I saw that a Beisa makes 70 kur. Now, Beit Shan is not in Eretz Yisrael proper. So and he was saying it as an incredible thing, Remeir. Remeir said, I went to a land and I saw such blessing that in a Beisa they can pull out 70 kur. It's unbelievable. He was very impressed. Now, if Tzoyan and Mitzrayim is considered the best land outside of the land of Israel, so the Gemara deduces that Tzoyan must also make at least 70 kur. You don't have any better land more than the land of Egypt. That the garden of God is like the land of Egypt. You don't have a better piece of land in the whole land of Egypt better than Tzoyan. Again, Egypt is considered the best, most fertile land, and from all the lands of the nations. And in Egypt itself, the best land is Tzoyan. Because that's where the kings used to go, to live there, to set up their vacation home. Because that was the best, the Beverly Hills of Egypt. Now in Eretz Yisrael, there is no worse land than Hebron. Hebron is the worst, most unfertile land. It's full of rocks. Why? And that's why they turned it into a cemetery. They have a cover shivcha. That's what they used it for. If you're going to allot land for burying, you're going to use land that's not good. Nevertheless, Hebron mevuna al achas meshiva b'tzayan. Now, Hebron, the Gemara deduces from a pasuk that Hebron is blessed and has it's the worst land of Israel, but it's blessed 7 times more than Tzoyan. And he brings a proof. I'm not going to get into that now. Anyways, he brings a proof, okay, that Hebron is 7 times more fertile than Tzoan in Mitzrayim. Okay, So now it comes out like this. Let's make a cheshbon. How much would grow in Chevron? If in Tzoan, which grows 70 kur to a Beisa. So you have to make 7. Now, Chevron, 7 times 7 is the worst. Even that is 7 times better. So 7 times 70. So 7 times 70, so we know 7 times 7 is 49. So it's 490. That in a Beisa in Chevron, if you would plant it, you can get 490 core out of it. Okay, but the problem is Chevron is full of stones. That means in between the stones it will grow. If you take away the stones, that means in Eretz Yisrael when it's not blessed, that's like Chevron land, which is the worst. It's 7 times better. So if it's not blessed, the land of Israel, so you have at least as good as Chevron, but without the stones. So therefore the Gemara says, if you take away the stones, you have another 10% of land. As a result of that, you can count from 490 core, let's make it 500 core. Chamesh Mea, so you can make 500. Okay. So Eretz Yisrael is supposed to produce how much? Because it's 7 times better than Tzoyan and Mitzrayim. And the Gemara derives that in Tzoyan and Mitzrayim you can produce 70 kur out of one Beisa. So now the Marit says, hold it. So now the Gemara says, so 500 kur for Eretz Yisrael. Now how about when there is a special blessing in Eretz Yisrael? How much better does it do? Oh, so the Gemara says, let's take a look at Yitzchak. When it's not blessed, when it's blessed, Ksivit says that Yitzchak planted Ba'aretz Ahi in that land. Okay, that's the land that Yitzchak planted. And what did he find? 100 times Meir Sha'arim. And what is the 100 Tanya? And what does it mean 100 times? It made. Hold on one second here. It made 100 times the amount that it was supposed to, 100 times what it was estimated. So now let's estimate. So the Gemara says, if it's 100 times 500 sa. So if it's 100 times 500, that's 50,000. So from there we derive that what? That Eretz Yisrael in its blessed time, because Yitzchak was blessed. So from this, that in Yitzchak it says it grew 100 times more than the estimation. So we first have to know what the estimation is. The land of Israel estimation is that in every Beisa, because even in Chevron, it produces 500 kur to a Beisa. Now you do 100 times that amount, 50,000 kur. That's what the Gemara says. That's the story. So now the Marit says, hold it. We see from here that what? That the year that Yitzchak was planting was a blessed year. Because the Gemara says, the Gemara derives from there what Eretz Yisrael grows in a blessed year. So you see that his year was a blessed year. So how does it fit with what Rashi says? No, it was not a good year. And that's the Chiddush, that even though it was not a good year, it grew so much. So, in any case, his answer, and this is really, really, really special. He says the bracha, he says, we're dealing, see that piece of land, because really he says, when the Gemara is darshaning over here the whole thing about the land of Israel deriving from Yitzchak, you can have a big question. Yitzchak wasn't even in Eretz Yisrael. Yitzchak is in the Philistine land. Yitzchak is in the land of Pelishtim. He's in the land of Gerar, which is not part of Eretz Yisrael. So how do we derive from there for Eretz Yisrael? The answer is that Yitzchak, the land, that particular land that we're dealing with, which is the land of Gaza, that whole stretch of land, it's part of Eretz Yisrael and it's not part of Eretz Yisrael. It's not part of the land of Israel because of all the years, because until Moshiach comes, it's not really part of the land of Israel. And therefore, it doesn't inherently have the bracha of Eretz Yisrael on its own. But by when Yitzchak went there, since Yitzchak living there was futuristic, the Eibishter is telling Yitzchak to live in that land, because if you're going to consider Yitzchak living in that land as it was currently during that time, Yitzchak would not be allowed to be there. Because Yitzchak is now going to go out of Eretz Yisrael, and that's not an Eretz Yisrael. So you have to say that when Yitzchak was living in that land, Yitzchak being in that land jump-started and pushed. Yitzchak living in that land pushed I don't know if I'm saying the right word, futurized it, pushed it into the future, which eventually this land is going to be in Eretz Yisrael. And that's why Yitzchak had that tremendous blessing. And now, what's the blessing of Eretz Yisrael? The blessing of Eretz Yisrael is when Jews are living there. And Jews are bringing the Shekhinah down in Eretz Yisrael, that's when it's being blessed. So what does the Eibishter say to Yitzchak? The Eibishter says to him, Shchein ba'aretz hazois, live in this land. And even though this is not now Eretz Yisrael, you should mei hashkana, you should dwell in this land. And you're going to bring the Shekhinah down in this land. And therefore it's going to be a big blessing. And that's why the Pasuk continues. He asks a question, another question which I didn't say earlier. In Pasuk Beis it says Shchein ba'aretz, live in the land. And Pasuk Gimel it says Gur ba'aretz. So which one is it? Is it Shchein, which means dwell here permanently, or Gur, which means live there temporarily? The answer is, the Eibush is telling him, make a Shekhinah in this land. Even though it's Gaza, even though it's not Eretz Yisrael, you make a Shekhinah in this land. And then Hashem is continuing, Gur ba'aretz hazois, even though it's only a temporary dwelling that you're going to be living over here. But still you should know, Ve'eya imach, I will be with you, V'avarechachan, I will give you the blessing. And what kind of blessing did Yitzchak get? Yitzchak got the full blessing in the land as if it was Eretz Yisrael proper, because it's going to be that way when Mashiach will come in the days of... And that's why Hashem continues. Ki lecha ulezaracha, because to you and to your children, to you now, it's being given. Ulezaracha means into your children at the end. Etenes kol ha'aratzos, I will give the ha'el, what did we say earlier? I'll give you these tough lands, which means this particular part of Israel is going to be the toughest part to conquer. Over here, you're going to have tension because this is fiercely opposed. There's a lot of klipa in that land. It's fiercely, the Philistine land is particularly the land that Sa'el is very strong. And that's why he continues, I will keep the promise that I made Avram. Marit says, why does he say it over here? I will keep. Hashem promised Yitzchak now. Because since this land is going to be contested until the end of days, so you should know I'm eventually going to keep the promise I gave to Avram. What's the promise Hashem gave to Avram? To Avram Avinu, by Brisbane Absarim, by the covenant amongst the pieces, it says that Avram promised Avram Avinu the land of 10 nations. In other words, then we're finally going to have Eretz Yisrael to its completion, including the lands of Edom, including the lands of Ammon and Moab. Once we take possession of the full 10 lands, as opposed to the other times when we were in Israel, we only took possession of 7 lands. And it's going to be the land of 10 lands. And once we take possession of the lands of the 10, then Gaza is definitely part of the land of Israel. And that's why the Eibush says to Yitzchak now, I will upright the Shavua that I made to Avram Avinu. And therefore you will already see now the blessing that's going to be in the future. Since in the future will be yours, and Bechlal, he doesn't say this, but we know that Yitzchak is futuristic, everything about Yitzchak is the future. And that's why, what does it say right after this blessing? Yitzchak went and he lived there. And what did he do? And Vayizra Yitzchak ba'aretz hahi. Yitzchak lived in that land. And even though it says, Rashi says it wasn't a blessed year. Yeah, it's outside of Eretz Yisrael. It wasn't at all a blessed year. But Yitzchak's dwelling in that land is similar to the Jewish people living in Eretz Yisrael, which brings the bracha. Vayimtza b'shana hi, and he found Meir Sha'arim 100 times as much. The ultimate blessing of Eretz Yisrael happened in that land. Vayerecheyu Hashem, and Hashem blessed him. What happened? Avimelech and his people saw this this blessing. Now what happened is like this. Yitzchak received the blessing, the extra blessing, the blessing of Eretz Yisrael when it is blessed. But since when Yitzchak was living there, that land was kind of considered as part of Eretz Yisrael, as we said before. It jumped into the future. So then it wasn't only Yitzchak, it was the whole Gaza, the whole area, the whole Gaza area, Avimelech's lands as well. And what happened was Avimelech also got a tremendous blessing. But what kind of blessing did they get? They got the blessing of Eretz Yisrael when Eretz Yisrael is not blessed. And it was Yitzchak got the blessing of Eretz Yisrael when Eretz Yisrael is blessed, which is 100 times as much. They had their lands upgraded to Eretz Yisrael when it's not blessed, which is 7 times as much as Soan and Mitzrayim, but still not. So they felt that Yitzchak stole their blessing because they suddenly see their lands are so good and he has so much more, so they blamed him that he stole their blessing. Later we're going to see that they come back to him. And what happened is Yitzchak moves away from there. And they go and they plant in the very land where Yitzchak planted, and they did not get that extra blessing. So they realized it wasn't Yitzchak stealing their most fertile land. They realized that the blessing was the blessing was Dafka Yitzchak's blessing. And they also realized that they got tremendous bracha in their lands, it's not as great as Yitzchak, but it's still tremendous blessing in their land. That too happened because of Yitzchak. That's why later they say that to him. They say, Ra'oi ra'inu, we see that Hashem was with you. V'noimar, because they saw the blessing that they got, now they attributed that to Yitzchak as well. So first they're so what happens? Take a look. The same story repeats itself. The Jews go into Gush Katif, and they take that B'chlal in Eretz Yisrael. Jews came back, and they started working the land. And true, is the Jewish people, Baruch Hashem, the Eibishter gave us brains, and they used all kinds of technique, and they're not lazy. And what you call the early mitnachlim, the early how they call them, the chalutzim, the early settlers. They did just incredible work. But we know their work is one thing. It's the Eibishter's bracha that came in. When Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael, the Eibishter's bracha came in. What did the Arabs see the moment? The Arabs didn't care for the land of Israel. Once the Jews came in and started making something that they wanted, the problem is when they get it, it loses its blessing. And you see that in Gush Katif, the same thing. We had the blessing. Any case. So now let's take it further. Once they chased Yitzchak away, so Yitzchak wanted to kind of test the blessing. To test this idea, the Eibishter tell not test, not because he doesn't believe, but because he has to actualize it. So what does he do? He goes back to the wells that his father dug. And he digs those wells to see if the blessing is there in this land. And he actually redug his father's wells. And he saw that now the Pelishtim didn't disrupt his father's wells that he built. But when he tried to dig a well of his own, see, the wells that Yitzchak is now going to dig is going to represent the entire history of the Jewish people trying to take conquest in Gaza, in those particular lands. So first he goes and he digs a well, and immediately hisasku imai. They come and they fight him. And they say the waters is ours. So that represents when the Jewish people came into Eretz Yisrael with Yeshua. And as I said earlier, Yehuda went up and he took mountain of the area of Gaza. That's what it says in the thing. And what happened? And then the Pelishtim fought back, and they made terrible trouble for the Jewish people until David and Shaul HaMelech and David HaMelech were able to neutralize them. So this is the first. That was the first well where it says Kiyas Askuim, where they fought with him. Then came the second one. Vayelech Misham. What does it say in the next one? Vayachbru Be'er Acheres. They came and they tried to dig a second be'er, and it's interesting. In the first well, it says that they produced water, and the Pelishtim came and they said, "It's our water." The second time, in Pasuk Chaf Aleph, it says they dug a second well, and they immediately fought against them. So he says this is referring to the time of when they came up with Ezra. When they came up with Ezra, they didn't even attempt to take Gaza. The first time when they came up, they did take it, and they said, this is our water. In other words, the Yidden had possession, at least on certain sections of it. But then they fought back and they lost it. But in the second time they came, which is in the days of Ezra, they didn't even have a chance on it. They fought it immediately. And that's why Vayikra Shmoy Sitna, they called it Sitna. Vayatik Mishal, and they dug a third well. That's referring to the third, when we're going to come with Melech HaMashiach to take possession of the land of Israel. In the end of days. So V'loi Ravu Alel, they're not going to fight upon it, referring to the land of Gaza. We're going to take that land, and there's not going to be any more contest. It's not going to be contested anymore. And that's why Yitzchak got so excited, and he called it Rechayvos. Hashem broadened us, which means now we have the full conquest of Eretz Yisrael. He wasn't talking about his time, because he wasn't going to live there. He was going to live in Beersheba. He was talking about the ultimate Rechayvos. Imagine that the Palestinian conflict is over, and the Jewish people have full possession of the land of Israel, including Gaza, including the land which are Ratzos Ha'el. You see how everything is in the Medrash. They're tough. Also, the Eibishter says, part of it you will take at certain intervals. You will have certain parts, but you won't have the whole. And when will I give you the whole? In the end of days. So this was also tested with Yitzchak, with the wells, as he retested this Inyan to see for himself how this conquest is going to play itself out throughout the ages, until we get to the ultimate conquest. So everything is in the Torah already. And the good part is that we're living in the time of history, that we're at the closing. Now, Hashem help already that it should already be Vayikra Shmoy Rechayvos Ki Hirchav Hashem Lanu. Hashem has broadened for us upon us. Hashem, join us next week as we're going to continue discussing the idea of a more spiritual idea about the wells. As Hashem in next week's class. Zayga Benched.